Hey guys, back again with a very large kit this week. This time we will be looking at Revell's 1/32nd scale F-A-18E Super Hornet. Let's open it on up and take a look at her. So, starting off, we have our two main nose halves, which does give you a preliminary sense of just how massive this kit is. I mean, this is big. You can also get a sense of amount of surface detailing that Revell's put into this. For the exterior detailing, it's very nice. Very fine, sharp, engraved panel lining. However, where things fall apart a little is here on the inside. The massive amount of ejector pin marks, and some of these are quite large. And fortunately, these are present almost throughout the kit, as we'll see. Moving on, we've got some of the detail screws as well as the main connectors for the stabilators. A couple other odds and ends parts, as you can see, such as on these internal panels for one of the main gear bays. They're quite nice. They did a decent job there. Ow. Next up, we've got one of our clear sprues. Now, unfortunately, here on the windscreen is an ever so slight bit of a seam line down the middle, so that will require cleaning up. It is unfortunate that even in this day and age, we're still having to deal with that type of problem, even on a new mold kit. Beyond that, the heads-up display is included here, as well as a few other odds and end parts for the various equipment included on the aircraft. Much the same problem exists here on the main canopy part as well. It does have a pretty significant seam line right down the middle. Hopefully this will show up on camera. But aside from that, the overall casting quality is pretty decent. Nothing really to complain about, just that nasty seam. Now, as we start getting into the bulk of the kit, one major plus that I do like that they did on this kit is they include full intake trunking for the engines. You're basically building from the front of the inlet all the way to the exhaust. So that is a nice inclusion. Does add a little bit of heft to the kit, so this very well will be a potential tail sitter, so that is something to be aware of. But the fact that they do include all this trunking is quite nice. As you can also see, you have a lot of the build up to the internals, as well as here on the nose gear bays, flaps, control surfaces, cockpit, and intake fan. Where things fall apart again, as I said, is the ejector pin marks, especially here in the trunking. Now, for most part, it's further back, so it's going to be less visible. However, it's still there. So I would say do some test fitting, see how much is potentially visible, and go from there. Another thing that's also prevalent throughout is a fair amount of flashing on some of the parts. To look at overall on my copy, it's not as bad as some that I've seen online, but it's definitely suggests a very poorly done mold. As I said, you can see this more here on this lower fuselage half as we move on. Again, the surface detailing is nice. They did a good job on that, but the execution seems to be just overall of a poor quality. Again, can see some of the rivetings on the leading edge surfaces. Next up, we've got one of the armament sprues. Compared to Hasegawa, obviously having a lot of the armaments included on this kit in the box is nice. And overall, I don't find any major issues with these. Moving on, and we got a double sprue containing the rest of our armaments, as well as ejection seat parts, and our two different options for our exhaust nozzles. A nice inclusion. More of the intakes, wheels, and various other odds and ends for the landing gear. As I said, more of the weapons. Unfortunately, you're only given a pair of AMRAMs and a pair of sidewinders of two different variety, which is unfortunate, which does mean you can't build the ultimate murder Hornet. But overall, as I said, the detailing is, especially compared to stuff even as recent as that Mustang we looked at recently, is good. I mean, it's a little sharper, a little bit better. But the overall execution still doesn't seem like it's fully there. We've got our boarding ladder, another landing gear, a couple other odds and end parts on this sprue. Next up, we've got now the main draw, this upper fuselage half. Again, you can see just how big this kit's going to be once it's built up. Also included are more of the control surfaces for the flaps, wings, and yeah, this is truly a massive kit. Again, detailing on the surface is good. They did a very good job here. Now, unfortunately, as I said, some of the execution just isn't there. There was some bits of flash here and there, and just they really could have done one more over in terms of quality control when they were doing the molds. More control surfaces. That's another thing. You can really tell just how much they, in some ways, over-engineered for both good and ill with this kit. The backplate for behind the cockpit. And that's another thing I should have mentioned when we were looking at the nose. The way they did it suggests to me that they're eventually planning to do an F. I am almost certain that they'll do an F, just by the way they've done some of the parts. Here we have the exterior for the intake trunking. Again, very nice surface detailing. Now, thankfully, this side part is not going to be seen, as it does have a lot of bad ejector pin markings throughout, much as has been a problem with a lot of this kit. We've got our outer wing sections, wing folds, which they do give you the parts to do either up or down. Continue on, we've got some more leads for our tail hook. And then finally, ending on our rudders, stabilators, landing gear doors, and the rest of the front office. Main dash is fine. I have no problems there. The detail, however, in the rest of the cockpit tub does seem lacking. It also seems somewhat shallow for the scale. I'd need to really take a ruler to it to see, but it does seem shallow. Also, I assume somebody's going to have a aftermarket resin cockpit along eventually, but yeah. And so, before I almost forget, we also have got our main and nose gear on here, and a very complicated breakdown, so that's going to be problematic. I'd almost say, just for simplicity's sake, it might be better to go with a white metal option. Now, give me a minute to get all these sprues back in, and then we'll move on to the decals. Okay, now the decals are given to you in this massive single sheet. You have two options, one a high vis and one a low vis. Now, overall, the color registration is gorgeous. They did a fantastic job here. Again, going back to that Mustang we did last time, the grays and blacks are in perfect color. Reds, yellows, greens, everything's bright, vibrant, as they should be. They did a fantastic job overall. Again, fortunately, I don't know how well this will show up. Unfortunately, while this camera does shoot HDR, my version of Premiere does not support it. Only complaint I found was here on the decals for the cockpit screens. Would have been nice had they maybe done, something with it to give it more lifelike appearance, as you would expect, instead of just a sort of blank green screen. Now, let's get into the massive, and I do mean massive, instruction sheet. Obviously, with something this massive and based solely on the parts, you can already guess assembly on this thing is going to be a marathon. This is one of the most complicated and long-running build sequences I've encountered. I mean, you're building up damn near everything. From landing gear bays, engine intakes, engines, you name it, they've done it on this kit. And there's no one area I would say is less complicated than the other. They are all equally complicated build sequences. So the only thing I can really say here is just take your time. This is not one you want to rush. This is definitely one to just go one step at a time, make sure you're doing it right, going with whatever option you're going for, and making sure for the one plane you're building that is right. Compared to past Revell instructions, I do think the instruction sheet does a fantastic job of bringing you along. However, just the sheer complexity and size of this build is daunting, to say the least. So I would definitely say this is not a build for the faint of heart. I would say definitely this is either going to be one that's going to sit in your stash for a long time, or it's one you want to only tackle when you've got the necessary skills. And as you can see, we're already several minutes in, still getting through the instructions. And we still haven't even gotten to the armament, which is its own section. And so I tried to speed up a little just to get there. Now, I do like they include this armament diagram. This is a great inclusion and will serve as a very good reference for even on other projects. But once we continue on, we get into building up all of the attachment pylons, the drop tanks, before finally getting into the weapons. Now, many pages in, for finishing out the last bits of details. Now, all this gets us then into our decaling options, which we were given two birds, as I said. This high vis scheme of VX9, and this low vis from BFA 105. Now, regardless of which option you do, once you do get them built, they are going to be very striking and attractive builds. Problem is going to be getting there. Now, what all do I think about this kit? I do feel like Revell is trying to push themselves. They're trying to get better. They're trying to make better kits. I just feel like they're not there yet. I think the Mustang was a big step forward. This, I feel like they bit off more than they could chew. They do a lot of things right, but the execution just doesn't seem like it's there. Now, I've also from some of my preliminary research, found a lot of people are saying the fit on this kit is not great. Honestly, just doing an inbox, I can't attest to that. And I'll admit this is one I'm probably going to stick in my stash for a long while. So that was a look at Revell's 1/32 scale A-18E Super Hornet, a kit that tries to push the envelope for Revell but falls short. So until next time.